All right, let's do this. Today we are going deep, deep into the world of logical fallacies.
Oh, fallacies.
Those tricky things, they're like sneaky tricks of thought.
Yeah, they can sound so convincing.
They totally do, but they weaken arguments, they don't strengthen them.
Right, right.
And you know what? It's like, once you understand them,
Oh, yeah.
you start seeing them everywhere.
Everywhere. It's crazy.
And it can be so eye-opening, like, I see what you did there.
Totally.
We're using this really cool document called Logical Fallacies Hand List, Arguments to Avoid When Writing. It's like our guide for this deep dive.
It's like a decoder ring.
Yeah, for spotting bad arguments, like, oh, that's a fallacy.
Yeah, and not just spotting them, but understanding why they're wrong.
Oh, that's important.
It helps you avoid them in your own arguments.
Right, so you can be a better communicator, be more persuasive.
Exactly.
So this document breaks down fallacies into 5 main categories.
Okay.
And the first one is fallacies of relevance. And these are all about using irrelevant information or emotional appeals, like trying to distract from the real issue.
It's like trying to win a game by changing the rules, instead of actually playing better.
Ooh, that's good.
Or distracting the ref.
Totally. It's like, look over there while you're doing something sneaky.
Exact.
And I think one of the most, striking examples in this category is the appeal to force.
Oh, yeah.
The document gives this example, this scenario of a school superintendent
Okay.
who's being pressured to cut the budget.
Uh-huh.
But there are these veiled threats like, you'll be fired if you don't do it.
Wow, that's intense.
It's a power play, right?
Yeah, it totally sidesteps any kind of logic.
It's just like, do what I say or else.
It shows you how force can be used to manipulate decisions.
It's scary, actually.
It is. It's something to be very wary of.
It's a good reminder that we should always be a little bit skeptical
Oh, yeah.
of arguments that are like, do this or else. Like, is there really good reason?
Right, exactly.
Now, this next one, I bet you've seen it in action. The genetic fallacy.
Oh, the genetic fallacy, yes.
Like guilt by association. You're judging something based on where it comes from.
Right, its origin, not its merits.
Not its actual qualities, yeah.
Like the example in the document, dismissing a Japanese car just because it's Japanese.
Not because it's a good or bad car.
Right, exactly.
Like saying all pizza's bad because you had one bad slice once.
Exactly.
It's just not logical, you know what I mean?
Totally.
Okay, moving on to another big one, and this one comes up all the time, especially if people are arguing, maybe even fighting. Argumentum ad hominem.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of addressing the argument itself, you attack the person making it.
It's a classic way to discredit someone.
Yeah, you should attack them.
Instead of dealing with their argument.
It happens all the time in, political debates.
Oh,
You
yeah.
completely lose sight of the actual policies. It's just all this personal stuff.
Name calling and all that.
Ugh, it's frustrating.
It is. It's a distraction tactic.
It totally weakens the quality of the discussion.
Absolutely.
We need to call it out when we see it.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
On a similar note,
Okay.
we have the argumentum ad populum, which is like praise on our desire to fit in.
Oh, yeah, to be part of the group.
Yeah, like everyone's doing it.
The bandwagon fallacy.
The bandwagon, yeah. But just because something is popular doesn't mean it's right.
Right,
The
right.
document points out that, even the idea that the earth was flat, that was a popular belief once.
Yeah, didn't make it true.
But it wasn't true.
Not at all.
And it's not just about popularity. It can also be like patriotism.
Oh, yeah, like if you don't support this, you're not a true whatever.
Or it's like, only smart people understand this, and if you don't, you're not in the club.
Exactly.
It's all about manipulating people's emotions.
Yeah, their sense of belonging.
Instead of actually giving a logical argument.
Right.
Okay, this next one, this is a fallacy we're all guilty of at some point.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The appeal to tradition.
We've always done it this way.
It's so easy to fall back on that, right?
It is. It's comfortable.
It is comfortable, but the document makes a good point.
Okay.
Just because something has always been done a certain way doesn't mean it's the best way.
Right. Or the most effective.
Like, for example, they talk about a city keeping its urban growth boundary at the same size for decades.
Oh, wow.
Just because it worked back then doesn't mean it's the right solution now.
Things change.
Things change,
You
yeah.
gotta adapt.
So clinging to tradition can actually stifle progress.
It can.
It can prevent us from adapting to new situations, right?
Totally.
So we have to be open to questioning the status quo.
Yeah. And looking for new solutions.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit
Okay.
and talk about the next category of fallacies. component fallacies.
Component fallacies, all right?
These are errors in the structure of the argument itself, like the steps.
The building blocks.
Yeah, the building blocks. And if those are messed up, the whole argument falls apart.
Right, right.
And one of the most common and often the most frustrating is begging the question.
Yes.
It's also known as circular reasoning.
It's like saying something is true because it's true.
Yeah, it's just going around in circles, no real evidence.
The document uses this example, arguing that God exists because the Bible says so, and the Bible's true because it's the Word of God.
It's like, what doesn't prove anything?
It's using the claim itself as evidence.
It's not valid.
Not at all.
We see this a lot when people are like defending beliefs they already have without really thinking about it.
Yeah, just accepting it without question.
Okay, next up we have hasty generalization.
Hasty generalization, oh boy.
This one, I'm definitely guilty of this sometimes.
I think we all are.
Yeah, it's that human tendency to just jump to conclusions.
It's based on like one or two things.
Limited evidence, yeah.
Like that example from the document about the statistic of women failing driving tests.
Oh, yeah, right?
What if that was based on like 2 women?
Tiny sample size, it wouldn't be accurate at all.
Yeah, exactly. You can't generalize from that.
It's like judging a whole country based on one bad experience with a tourist.
Right, exactly.
So we have to be careful about sample size.
Yeah, and whether it's actually representative.
Speaking of making connections where they might not exist,
Oh, yeah.
let's talk about the false cause fallacy.
False cause, okay.
This is all about assuming a cause and effect relationship where it might not actually be there.
Like that classic saying, after this, therefore because of this.
Right. Just because one thing happened after another doesn't mean the first thing caused the second.
Not necessarily, no.
The document talks about the argument that violent video games cause violent behavior.
That's a common one.
But there could be a correlation, but is it really the cause?
There might be other factors.
So many other factors.
Exactly.
This fallacy reminds us that correlation doesn't equal causation.
Right. Important distinction.
We really have to look at all the possible factors.
Before jumping to conclusions.
All right, here's where things get a little sneaky. The straw man fallacy.
Straw man. Ooh, that's a tricky one.
This one, it feels almost like a debate tactic.
It is. It's a way to misrepresent your opponent's argument.
Yeah, you make it easier to attack.
Like setting up a fake target.
Imagine someone advocating for more funding for social programs,
Okay.
and their opponent says, so you just want to give handouts to lazy people.
Classic straw man.
Right. They twisted the argument.
Complete.
It's like that's not what they were saying at all.
It's a way to derail the discussion.
Yeah, it's not productive.
And it makes you feel like you won, even though you didn't really address the real argument.
Exactly. So we have to recognize this both in others and in ourselves.
It's a subtle form of manipulation.
Okay, last but not least, in this category of component fallacies,
All right.
we have the slippery slope fallacy.
Slippery slope. I love this one.
This one makes me think of dominoes.
Yeah.
Like one thing leads to another, leads to another.
And it always ends in disaster, supposedly.
Yeah, one small action
Mm.
leads to all these increasingly negative consequences.
But with no evidence to back it up.
The document gives this example, it's so funny, about banning plastic straws,
Okay.
leading to a complete loss of privacy in the United States.
Wow. That escalated quickly.
It's like if we let kids stay up 15 minutes later, they'll never go to bed, and they end up living on the streets.
Right. It's total exaggeration.
It plays on our fears.
Yeah. Fear and exaggeration.
We have to evaluate each step, like, is that really going to happen?
Look at the evidence.
Don't just speculate.
Exactly.
Okay, let's take a breath.
Phew.
Move on to the next category of fallacies, which are all about tricky language.
Ooh, wordplay.
Wordplay, yeah, it can be so misleading.
It can. These fallacies are like those riddles, where the answer depends on a word having 2 meanings.
Oh, yeah.
It's fun with words, but it's not logic.
Not for a real argument, no.
The document calls this one equivocation.
Equivocation, okay.
It's like changing the meaning of a word in the middle of an argument.
It's a trick you.
So you end up with a wrong conclusion. They have a good example using a quote from Plato
Okay.
about how the end of something is its perfection.
Okay.
But they twist the meaning of end to make it sound like Plato was talking about death.
Oh, I see, like the end of life.
But that's not what he meant at all.
It's misleading.
It's like that shell game,
Yeah. Where's the ball?
You get tricked because things keep moving.
So we have to be careful about how words are being used.
Especially if the meaning keeps changing.
All right, let's move on to fallacies of omission.
Okay, fallacies of omission.
These are about leaving out important information.
Like hiding evidence.
It's like showing someone a puzzle with some pieces missing.
They don't get the full picture.
The document talks about stacking the deck as a prime example.
Stacking the deck. Okay.
It's like that friend who only talks about their successes, never their failures.
So you think they're doing great, but...
They're only showing you part of the story.
Exactly.
It's like creating a biased perspective.
By hiding the stuff that doesn't support your claim...
So we always have to look for a balanced view.
Multiple perspectives.
All the evidence, not just the bits that fit your story.
Right.
Now, after all these fallacies, all these ways arguments can go wrong,
Yeah.
it's kind of nice to talk about something that helps us cut through all that mess.
Something positive.
You're talking about Occam's razor, right?
Occam's razor. Oh, that's a good one.
The document explains it as a way to choose the simplest explanation.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, when there are lots of possible explanations for something.
Don't overcomplicate things.
They use that example about a dog escaping from its kennel.
Okay, I remember that one.
Was it the owner who forgot to latch the door? Or was it a master lockpicker who broke in and freed the dog for no reason?
Yeah, that's a bit far-fetched.
Occam's razor would say, go with the simpler explanation.
The owner forgot to latch the door.
Unless there's, like, real evidence of the lockpicker.
Right, you need a good reason to believe the more complicated story.
It's like a mental shortcut.
To avoid those crazy explanations.
But it's important to remember, it's not perfect.
Right, sometimes the simplest answer isn't the right one.
But it's a good place to start.
Keep it simple.
Okay, so we've covered a lot.
We have.
We've looked at fallacies of relevance.
Right, those emotional appeals, irrelevant stuff.
Then we tackled component fallacies.
Errors in the structure of the argument.
Then we had fallacies of ambiguity.
Tricky language, wordplay.
And fallacies of omission.
Leaving out important info.
And finally, Occam's razor.
Our tool for simplicity.
It's like we've built this mental toolkit.
For taking apart bad arguments.
And hopefully
yes.
building better ones ourselves.
That's the goal.
Being better communicators.
More persuasive.
But before we finish this deep dive into the logical fallacies,
Okay.
I want to leave you with something to think about.
All right.
We've been using this logical fallacies hand list.
It's been great.
So helpful. It's unpacked all these types of flawed reasoning.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, are there even more fallacies out there?
Ones that aren't even on this list.
Like, what else are we missing?
That's a good point. It shows you that logic.
In critical thinking.
It's an ongoing process.
We're always learning.
There's always new ways to twist arguments.
So it's not just about memorizing a list.
No, it's about developing a mindset.
Of always questioning.
Evaluating the information we get.
This hand list is a starting point.
The real goal is to understand the principles.
So we can apply them to anything.
Exactly.
It's like we've got new lenses to see the world with.
Oh, yeah.
We can spot these fallacies everywhere.
Everywhere. It's amazing.
In ads, political speeches, even just talking to friends and family.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Think about those times you felt like something was off about an argument.
But you couldn't explain why.
Now we have the tools to break it down.
See the flaws in the logic.
You can see the emotional appeal.
The manipulation tactics.
The misleading statistics.
The straw man arguments.
It's like having a mental shield.
To protect yourself from bad arguments.
And that is so powerful.
It is.
But here's the challenge. Now that we know about these fallacies, how can we use this knowledge?
Not just to defend ourselves.
But to make our own arguments stronger.
To be persuasive.
So it's not just about breaking down bad arguments.
It's about building good ones.
Using logic and reason.
To convince people.
And it's a journey.
It is.
The more we practice,
the better we get
at spotting fallacies.
And building good arguments.
You get better at thinking critically.
And communicating effectively.
This deep dive into logical fallacies has given us a lot to think about.
A lot to think about.
It reminds us that critical thinking.
It's so important these days.
And by understanding logic, we can be better listeners.
More persuasive speakers.
More informed citizens.
Absolutely.
So keep that logical fallacies hand list close.
Don't forget what we've learned.
Keep questioning.
Keep analyzing.
Keep those mental gears turning.
That's how we learn and grow.
But here's another challenge. Right?
Okay.
Now that we know about these fallacies.
Yeah, we've got all this knowledge.
How can we use it not just to, like, defend ourselves?
Protect ourselves from bad arguments.
Right, but to make our own arguments stronger.
Oh, so we can be more persuasive.
Exactly. So it's not just about tearing down bad arguments. It's about building good ones.
That's the real test, right?
Yeah, it's like we can spot the tricks, but can we do the magic ourselves?
Can we use logic and reason to convince people?
And that's a whole other skill, right?
It is. It's like going from student to master.
From apprentice to Jedi.
There you go. You got to build your lightsaber of logic.
And it's a journey, right?
Yeah, it's ongoing.
The more we practice, the better we get.
At spotting fallacies, at building arguments,
It all makes us better thinkers.
more effective communicators.
So this deep dive into logical fallacies, it's given us a lot to think about.
It really has.
It reminds us that critical thinking is, like, essential.
Especially these days, with so much information flying around.
And by understanding logic,
Those basic principles,
we can be better listeners. We can be more persuasive.
we can be more informed citizens, making better decisions.
Absolutely.
So keep that logical fallacies hand list handy.
That's a good reference.
Keep those mental gears turning, keep questioning, keep analyzing.
That's how we learn and grow.
And that's it for this deep dive.
Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.